All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. Welcome to tonight's virtual event featuring Frogs Leap. My name is Shannon, and I'm a member of the New Hampshire Liquor and Wine Outlet social team. Tonight is super exciting. We are joined by John Williams, who is the owner and winemaker at Frogs Leap Winery. So John's going to be bringing us through a super exciting presentation and talking about the sustainable farming practices at the winery, as well as the impact that climate change has on really everyone and everything. We're also going to be tasting 4 different wine varieties tonight, so make sure you've got your wine bottles and wine glasses ready. In addition to John, we're also joined by Chad Gibson of the New Hampshire Liquor and Wine Outlets Wines marketing team. Chad's here to answer any and all of your questions regarding availability, as well as inventory of the Frogs Leap wines. So make sure you leave questions for him and obviously leave some for John as well. John, with that, I will pass it off to you to get started.
Well, thanks, Shannon. I mean, this is kind of like a second round around. We're having fun with each other. So, and you've told me what
Right?
a tremendous success these virtual tastings have been. So it's really exciting, isn't it? We didn't even see this a year ago. We didn't know what was going on. So this is exciting. Welcome, everyone. And may I ask that everyone, no matter what wine, and you don't even need to tell me, but you need to get a glass here. And I am going to start with our Frogs Leap Sauvignon Blanc, the 19 vintage. And I've poured myself a glass already, but I want you guys to get a glass of wine in your hand because, quite honestly, I'm not very comfortable talking to people who are not drinking. So it's important to me that you have something in your glass. And what better than our Frogs Leap Sauvignon Blanc, the one wine we've been making all 41 years that Frogs Leap has been a winery. So this is this wine represents a third of our production. It really is kind of the beer that made Milwaukee famous, if you will. Recognizing that it's not beer, we're not famous, and we're not in Milwaukee. But other than that, this is what speaks up for this wine. And so our crisp, fresh Sauvignon Blanc. A lot of people are surprised to find that Frogs Leap, half of our production is white wine. A third of it is Sauvignon Blanc. We also make a Chardonnay, and we're going to try that in a little bit. And so we're big white wine fans, and it's a big part of what we do. And then we got two reds today, including one special wine that has only been seen in the state of New Hampshire. And so we got a couple reds to try as well. And just really fun to be with you. Yeah, I'm seeing everyone's still, I'm seeing a little chat on here where a few of you are joining in. Let's just keep the fun going on. I'm going to show you a little picture of, this is my house right down there. If you look in there carefully, is that showing up on the screen for folks? Yeah, there's my house there, the old Rossi Ranch, now the Williams Rossi Vineyard, and that's where we grow our Cabernet Sauvignon. But if you look right behind that barn, Colin, you'll see the Valdegay that went into that wine that we're talking about, planted in 1947. This is an interesting picture because it shows how dynamic the Napa Valley really is. And a lot of people don't get that. Napa is a very small wine growing region, 25 miles long and 2 miles wide at the widest point. And so, I mean, this is roughly a third the size of the Medoc or where Bordeaux is. And so a lot of people think Napa is where California wine comes from, but it's only 4% of California wine comes from the Napa Valley. So it's a very, very small and very special wine growing region. A lot of people ask why we make so many different wines. I mean, in Bordeaux, they make Bordeaux. They make red wine from Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Cabernet Franc. But Napa is a very unusual wine growing region, and it's going to go into this whole idea of sustainability in that even though we're such a small region, it's a dynamic region. And as many of you know, we grow everything from Pinot Noir and Chardonnay at the lower part of the valley to Cabernet and Zinfandel and Petit Sirah and stuff at the top of the valley. And that seems kind of crazy to people until you know a little bit about the climatic influence of the Pacific Ocean. Even though Napa is only 25 miles long, on a given summer day, and today's not quite a perfect example, but it's almost there, the temperature at the top of the Napa Valley in the warmest in the afternoon can be as much as 15 to 20 degrees warmer than 25 miles to the south in the Carneros region, right along the San Francisco Bay. That's almost unheard of. I mean, if you were in Europe, you'd have to go from the top of Finland to the south of Spain to see that much difference in Europe. So Napa is a very dynamic region climatically. It's also very, very dynamic in terms of the soil types that it has. We have 134 soil types. You know, in the Medoc or in Burgundy, Burgundy has one soil type, Bordeaux has one soil type. We have 134. And so that rainfall patterns, microclimates, alluvial fans, all these things contribute to a very diverse region where to properly make wines that reflect the soils, if you only plant one grape variety, you're not going to get there. And so I think that's what's really interesting about Napa. And it's fun to, I know Napa's, of course, got its great name for great Cabernets, but I think it's fun to explore, as we're going to today, some of the more unique wines from the Napa Valley. I think that's where a lot of excitement lies. So I would always say look for Napa on the label, but don't necessarily only look for Cabernet on the label. Of course, if you want a great Cabernet, I would recommend you only look for Frog's Leap on the label, but that's a different story. Anyway, here's our Sauvignon Blanc, fresh, crisp, lively, refreshing, and full of that remarkable character we call terroir, this idea that a wine can come from a very special place. All the great wines in the world have this unique character of place. And I had a young woman ask me once, she says, you know, I've been studying wine and I don't quite understand this terroir thing. What's terroir? And I said to her, I said, you know, it sounds like you've got a little bit of an accent. Here, I'm going to give you a little scene out of the vineyard with the fog rolling down the hills. We'll talk about that. I said, it sounds like you have a little accent. She says, yeah, I'm from South Carolina. And I said, well, tell me about that. You grew up down there? She says, yeah. And I said, well, you know, where'd you go to church? Proud Baptist, you know. And she went on about, you know, well, tell me about the food you ate when you were a kid, and then where'd you go to school? Because your accent's thinned out a little bit. She says, oh, I went to school in Boston. And she started telling me about it. So I said, well, you say all those experiences you've had in life, everything from who your ancestors were to where you grew up to what you ate, to where you went to church, how you went to school, what you read, and so on. All those things have contributed to you having the personality that you have today. She says, yeah, of course. I said, well, that's what terroir is. It's the personality of a wine that's really based on all these factors, all these actors, we call them, that go into making a wine special. And so, yes, the climate, the soil, the men and women who work in the vineyard, where the barrels age, the kind of wood that it ages in, all these things participate in making a wine unique. And the greatest wines in the world are that collection, wines that have true personality. And I introduce this topic because I think it's a great introduction to the topic of sustainability and organic farming and biodynamics and all the things that we do. Because I think a lot of people know that about Frog's Leap, that we have been farming organically now for, 32 years this year we've been certified organic. So a long time, kind of before it was cool, to be honest with you. Actually, before most people even had heard of it, unless they were a hippie or a back-to-lander, which I was both, by the way. So that kind of makes it part of the story. But, you know, a lot of people don't know exactly what organic farming is. I like to kind of clear up the record on that. Basically, organic farming is just a natural-based soil fertility method. The idea that the way we return fertility to the soil is differently than a conventional farmer. It's based on the writings of a guy named Sir Albert Howard, who wrote two books in the early part of the 20th century, one called An Agricultural Testament, the other Soil and Health. And he had discovered in studying agricultural systems, particularly ancient agricultural systems, what he called the law of the return, the idea that if you take from the soil, you must give back to the soil in equal measure. And that's the principle of organic farming, is that you need to return to the soil. And I think every farmer knows this, but how you do that is what he codified. And the difference really between organic farming and conventional farming is that conventional farming uses inputs. So you do fertilizer and other things to return to the soil. In organic farming, we return using organic matter. Compost and cover crops would be the two main tools that we have. Compost, of course, the woody material, all the grape pumice, everything left over from our other vineyard, from our fruit operations and so on, along with animal manure, composted and returned to the soil. But then the other big one, and I think I got a picture of this. This is us crimping the cover crop. This is just a few weeks ago. Look at the amazing amount of stuff that's growing in this vineyard, and that's all been growing all winter long and is being returned back into the soil. So it's the combination of cover crops and compost that returns to the soil in equal measure. And this is the principle of organic. A lot of people think it's about not using chemicals or sprays or so on and so forth. And to a certain extent it is, and certain things are prohibited. But the real big deal about organic farming is that by building fundamental soil health, you produce healthy soils. Healthy soils produce healthy plants, and healthy plants, like healthy people, are naturally resistant to disease. And so I mean, I do use the analogy of our own health. We know that if we eat a balanced diet and get exercise and don't burn the candle on all three ends, that we remain healthy, and that we're less likely to have to take the steroids and the antibiotics and all the shit you see advertised on TV that you're not supposed to take to fix a problem. If you're healthy, you don't need those things. And that's really the principle of organic farming. Healthy soil, healthy plants, natural resistance to disease. Therefore, you don't need all these inputs that come in conventional farming. And so I often say that organic farming isn't so much about not using chemicals. It's about not needing chemicals. It's about building fundamental soil health. And this all has an impact on the wine and part of the personality of the wine, which is why we bring it up. I hope a few of you at least have this Sauvignon Blanc and chat it up if you can. I mean, crisp, clean, fresh, delightful, easy to drink. But I want you to get a little bit beyond that, because I think that a lot of people think that kind of white wine is just, that's what you have before you have red wine. But white wines have amazing complexity once you get into it. And I think you can get it with this Sauvignon Blanc. And we treat our white wines with as much or more respect as we do our red wines. How we grow them, how we make them, very natural winemaking techniques, with the idea that white wines can be full of terroir, have their own personalities of themselves. And I just love the personality of this wine. I don't know if you've noticed, Colin, but lately we've been adding getting a little bit more yeast and lees contact on our Sauvignon Blanc, and so you get a little bit of tiny bit of the reductivity in this wine, and it just makes it that much more complex and that much more interesting.
Yeah, and you're not losing any of the mineral aspect that you guys have, and that's what I think is so unique about your Sauvignon Blanc versus a lot of the other Sauvignon Blancs coming out of the Napa Valley. They're not full of melon. I mean, you have great fruit content, but it's not that fruit overwhelming Sauvignon Blanc. This is very classic and true to style. So I absolutely, it's my favorite Sauvignon Blanc out of the Napa Valley.
Oh, I love it, and I love Colin. Isn't he a great man? You tell you, gotta love that guy. My first visit to France was to Sancerre, and when I was a formative winemaker, and it was a very instructive to me because I just started drinking French wines, and to go to Sancerre, I mean, this is many years ago, and to see the whole cuisine of the area, the whole history, the whole culture of the area had developed around this beautiful variety in Sauvignon Blanc. And any of you who've had a truly great Sancerre know that it is. I mean, you go there and it's just a fabric of the whole culture there. And that was such a powerful lesson for me to think about white wine differently, to think about its terroir. I think it's a point of discussion that Sancerre's, the Loire whites have become so popular that much like in Napa Valley, the demand for these wines has grown so much that you have to make a decision of whether you're going to increase your production and follow that demand, or whether you're going to double down on quality. And I think you probably know how Frog's Leap bears down on that. You can see it in the wine here. We've actually doubled down on making this wine very special. The organic growing for sure, but these grapes are all dry farmed as well. And it's a fun thing to talk about, the fact that all of our vineyards are farmed without irrigation. And that's a little bit of a shock to people as well. I don't think it should be, quite honestly. I mean, when I came to the Napa Valley in 1975 on the Greyhound bus with $40 in my pocket, there were no irrigated vineyards in the Napa Valley. So when you think about all the great wines that established the reputation of the Napa Valley, the great Beaulieu's and Inglenook's and the great Robert Mondavi wines and the Chapelet 69 and the Stag's Leap that won the Paris tasting. I know I bottled that wine. That vineyard was a dry farm vineyard. There were no irrigated vineyards at that point. And now irrigation has become so popular. I'd say easily 97% of the vineyards have irrigation or supplemental watering in the summer. And you say, well, what's wrong with that? And I suppose the answer is nothing. But that's not how we feel about it. We believe that it is this deep connection, this deep rooting connection to the soil that's fundamental to making wines of balance, restraint, and with respect to this idea, the natural expression of the vine, things that we actually put on our label. If you've got a label there, you can read it right at the very bottom. So dry farming is a way of connecting the wines deeply to their soil and their climate, and I think it's so important, really. And so that's what we do. So here you see returning organic matter. If you looked in there in this slide, you'd see that there are all kinds of things growing in there. Some of those light colored things are bell beans. Bell beans, of course, are legumes. And so that's how we get nitrogen back into our soil, as we would plant legumes and fix nitrogen on their roots. Now, we don't want too much nitrogen, so that's mixed with other things and grasses. You see the natural mustard there. You see some grass up on the side. And so this actual mix of cover crops is very important to us and is calculated. So these have been seeded with our fertility in mind. So we do soil analysis and petiole analysis, so we know the nutritive content of our vineyards. And then we can mix up the seeds mixtures, these cover crop mixtures, in proportions that we think are necessary to add that fertility back. So we use several different legumes. I mentioned bell beans, but we do favas, we do clovers, we do vetch. We have Austrian winter peas. There's some of those in there. And so it can be a mix of legumes. We're trying to make this a very complex mixture. Now, if we're trending high in nitrogen, we wouldn't put so many legumes into the mix because we don't want to get the soil too fertile either. Great thing to keep in mind about vineyard soils is they need to be good, but not too good. Too much fertility leads to problems in the vineyard. So there you go. There's some nice vetches. This is an interesting experiment that you see going on here. Is generally speaking, when you dry farm, you till these cover crops back into the soil, and that's an important to incorporate them, because if you have too many things growing, remember Napa is a Mediterranean climate. We get no rain basically from this time of year. We won't see rain again until November, and so it's completely dry. And that's why people like to irrigate us, that we get no rain at all. But we can't have things growing in the vineyard during the growing season because they suck too much water out of the system. But anyone who knows about farming knows that tillage can also be damaging to the soil. It breaks down the soil structure, particularly in the top part of the soil. So this is actually an experiment going on. If you look at that implement behind the tractor, that's called a crimper. And what that is doing is going in, it's breaking these stems in half. The roots keep on living, but the stem of the plants have been broken, so they can't transpire water up out of the soil. So we are looking to dry farm without tillage so that we can retain the value of our soil, but still dry farm. And believe me, there are only 3 or 4 of us in California experimenting with this, and we're hopeful that it's going to work, because now we get the best of both worlds. We can dry farm and still not use tillage. So these are the ongoing kind of experiments that we have. That's kind of fun. Yeah, I don't know if anyone has the Chardonnay. I do, and I want to pour myself a glass because I am so proud of my Chardonnay. So here we go. If you've got the Chardonnay, you notice that what it says on there, shale and stone. All right, because we wanted people to know that our Chardonnay is a little different. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of a lot of California Chardonnays. A lot of them are just, I know people love these wines, but they're just too rich. They're too full. They're too heavy. They're too sweet. They're too alcoholic. They're too everything. And we've got names for them: butter and butterball. And everyone loves these kind of sweet, oaky Chardonnays. but not everyone. I say that, but that's not our style. Obviously, we're all about balance and restraint. And so this wine's made in really a completely different style. California Chardonnays tend to break down into two categories: what I would call the tropical fruit flavored pancake syrups, and you know what I mean by that. We were talking about those, but a lot of people also make what I would call faux burgundies. This idea that we all love Chablis and we all love our Merceaux and our Puigny Montrachets, and that's what we want to make in Napa. And so we go to Burgundy, and I've spent many hours over there with the idea that I could copy their methods and make white Burgundy in the Napa Valley. And it's been quite a lesson for me to know that that doesn't work out so well. First of all, if you put Napa in Europe, you'd be below Barcelona, Spain. So our climate is quite a bit different than Burgundy. But two, whenever you try to imitate someone else's wine, you're really not going to get there. And so it took me a long time to realize that really to make a wine that honored what I loved about Chardonnay, we had to do it in a completely different way. And that's what we do here. So this wine is 100% barrel fermented in brand new French oak, but only for 4 days, only for 4 or 5 days until it gets to the peak of its fermentation. It's a natural yeast fermentation like all of our wines. But once it gets to the peak of its fermentation energy, I take it out and put it into a concrete tank, and then it'll spend its next 11 months untouched trying to get that nice yeasty, toasty, leesy sort of character that can come with great Chardonnay. And the real key to that is all that energy allows the wine to ferment completely dry. So if you've got a glass of this right now, you're tasting it and going, oh my God, that has no fermentable sugar in it whatsoever. And that brings out the natural acidity in the wine and the freshness. It's also about 1.5 degrees lower in alcohol than a typical California Chardonnay. And you would be surprised how much body alcohol can add to the wine. So we're trying to make this wine as vibrant and fresh and as lively as we can. And of course, we have trouble selling this because people who would look for this style of Chardonnay wouldn't normally think about a Napa Chardonnay. And of course, people who like the tropical fruit flavored pancake syrups are tasting this going, what the hell is this? And so that's why we put the shale and stone on here to indicate that this is going to be a more minerally style. It's grown in decomposed shale. The vineyards were planted in 1979, so these vines are over 40 years old. We've been making the wine from it since 1985. We don't own this vineyard. It's the only wine here that's not estate, but shale and stone. So grown in decomposed shale and aged in concrete. So that's the stone part of this. And I think it's believe me, I'm surprised we have any of this wine to sell because at the rate my wife drinks it, it's amazing that there's any left. I'll tell you. And I'm almost there with her. We put this in a thermos and take it to the movies. It's great with popcorn, by the way. A lot better than those buttery Chardonnays. Did I sell any of that, Shannon, with my description?
That was wonderful. We actually
It'll be gone from the stores tomorrow, huh?
We actually even had a question that was referring, and I didn't even need to ask you because you already spoke to it, about how you kind of rated your Chardonnay, whether it was more of a buttery Chard or a dry steel Chard.
Right.
But we do have.
Well, we tried to make this in stainless steel, and we weren't getting the same result. So it brings up this whole point of why we age wine and what's the purpose of aging wine and what is the élevage of wine, and a brief description of it, and I'll give you an analogy. Is that for the chemical nerds out there. Wine is essentially a collection of organic chemicals, everything from water to ethanol to aldehydes. All these ingredients that are in wine are organic chemicals, and all organic chemicals have sites on them where hydrogen ions are attached, and then over a period of time, the hydrogen ions dissociate, and oxygen ions go onto that space. And that's essentially what happens as a wine ages, is this kind of slow replacement of the hydrogen ions with oxygen ions. And so what do you need to have that? Well, you need to have the wine, but you also need to have air in small amounts in the aging process. You don't want too much because then the reaction will go too fast and you'll actually go past the point and into an oxidized wine. And that's why people age in barrels, is that it slowly reduces. There's little minute amount of oxygen trapped in the wood fibers, and that gives it up to the wine in slow amounts, and that slowly allows the flower to open up. And that's really how we talk about this, is the flowering of the wine. And for everyone out there who's been like me, the wife sends me off to get some flowers, and I come back and they're all pretty and the flowers are all out like this. And my wife goes, oh my God, and the reason is that if your flowers are fully fleshed out or fully in bloom when you bring them home from the florist, the petals fall off pretty quickly, right? And she comes home with flowers and I say, you paid money for that? They're so tight you can barely see any color at all. But sure enough, over the next 2 or 3 weeks, we slowly open and have beautiful flowers for a long time. And that's really what we're trying to do in wine, is this kind of slow evolution, or the slow evolvement of the wine. So that's part of the art of winemaking, both in the aging process in the cellar, but also knowing that moment of when to put it in the bottle just as the flower starting to open, so they can open over a number of years in the bottle. And this is this whole idea of, people talk about reductivity in winemaking. That's when it's the flower is completely closed. And then of course you get to the oxidative phase. And that's important because that's how all the fruit elements come out, and so on and so forth. So being a reductive winemaker is really important in our mind. Now, a lot of people actually are deliberately getting their flowers to open in the barrel. They'll actually do what we call micro-oxygenation. They'll put minute amount of oxygen into the barrel to get the flower to open more quickly. And you say, why would they do that? And the answer is that they are trying to get that wine to smell beautifully in the barrel, because that's when the critic comes to judge it, essentially. And so they're really trying to show their flowers early. And the only problem with that is those petals tend to fall off as you age the wine. So be very, very careful about that. If a young wine is just too expressive, too much in flower, you probably want to enjoy those flowers right away and don't put them in your cellar. This wine, you can really sense the reductivity. The fact that it's beautiful now, boy, oh my gosh, over the next year or two, that's just going to really open up and be, as you pour it out of the thermos and gets your handful of popcorn at the movies, it's really going to make a big difference, basically. And if I've done my job, it will open up while you're enjoying it on the table. That's what this is all about. So, organic farming, we talked about dry farming. I'd like to talk very briefly about biodiversity, the fact that we grow almost 40 other crops here at the winery besides grapes. Peaches are our next biggest crop. We grow peaches, pears, figs, apples, cherries, nectarines, pomegranates. We have garden crops. We have citrus, and all this grows in and amongst our grapevines in a big sort of way. And everyone says, why are you giving up that land? You could grow more grapes. And the answer is that all these species interact amongst themselves, and you want this biodiversity from a insect point of view, and in a predator, you want to invite life back into the farming system, and that's hugely important, this concept of biodiversity. It has so many different advantages in addition to that. One of the big ones that we didn't even calculate into this is that by having all these other crops, it allows us to keep our farm workers employed year-round. And so whereas most vineyards will hire their vineyard workers for 9 months or so, and then they get their grapes picked and they're fired, and then they hire them back in January or February when they start to go pruning again. And maybe that's okay, but I'll tell you, that's begotten that, winemaking or wine growing, viticulture is such a specialized art that if you're not keeping your people on a regular basis, you lose that experience, you lose that, those people have to go make money somewhere else, and chances are they may not come back. And so a big part of this for us is retaining those workers. Of course, from a social, I don't even have to go on about from a social equity point of view, how important it is to have full-time benefit employees with livable wages and health benefits and so on. You can imagine that. But just from a wine quality point of view, this is hugely different. So we can go from picking grapes to picking olives to pruning peaches. And the idea is that by having multiple crops, we can keep all of our farm workers busy year round. And I think that's pretty cool, and part of this biodiversity sort of thing. In sustainability, we talk about the 3 E's. One of them is economic viability. And so wineries have got to make money because if you're not making money, the first thing that goes out the window is social equity and environmental responsibility, right? So you got to make enough money to keep the doors open. So let's just put that aside. I think when most people think about sustainability, they think about the environmental part of sustainability, power and water and greenhouse gases and pesticides and all these sort of things that we associate with environmental. And honestly, that's where I came from as I got interested into the concept of sustainability, was all from the environmental side of the world. But slowly, as I developed my own business and thought about so many of these things, we started to realize that the third E of sustainability, social equity, was also important, because without social justice, there can be no environmental justice. And without economic viability, there's not going to be either one. So all these things fit together. So people talk about the three E's of sustainability: economic viability, environmental responsibility, and social equity. And I think that, you're constantly trying to find the balance between all of these. And I think that's kind of what's really exciting. What do you guys, I hope a few of you had a chance to try the Chardonnay. Do we have any feedback on the Chardonnay, Shannon?
I think you've sold it. We've got a couple people talking about how they've been looking for a Chardonnay exactly like that. Great news. Tracy loves her Chardonnays, and she is sold on yours.
Excellent.
But we actually, going back, we have a couple of questions from the dry farming, if you want to tackle any of those.
Yeah.
So Anne is actually curious. She had heard that vines suffer. The more the vines suffer, the better the wine. Is that your take to some extent?
I've heard that over the years too, and I certainly understand what I mean, but I think that can be carried to extreme too. And again, I use the same analogy for ourselves. I don't think we need to suffer to have a vibrant and beautiful life, but I do think we need to work. And so the way I think about that is, vines need to work. They need to have to mine their own nutrients. They need to find their own water. They need to live a life of purpose. And all of us know people who've never had to work a day in their life. Don't spend time with these people. They are really boring people. And so I think vines that have it handed to themselves, they're getting all their nutrient and all their fertilizer and all their water out of a drip hose that drips it. I mean, I got vineyards around me who they got a root ball the size of a basketball, getting there almost every week. They're getting their water and their fertilizer. They never have to work. They never have to mine the soil. And they make the most boring wines in the world. And honestly, I think the most boring people in the world are those who never really have to work for a living. Now, I don't think you need to suffer, but I do think you need to work. And so that's how I draw the balance between those two. But it's an excellent question. And I really do think that we don't ask our vines to suffer. If they are willing to put in the work, they can find the moisture, they can find the nutrient. It's there. They just have to work for it a little bit harder. And I think that makes them a better vine and a better person, if you will. So that's how I would answer that question. Yeah, good question though. Who are these people?
Awesome. that was Anne, and she actually has another question about the dry farming too, asking if you plant roses at the end. She uses the reference, the canary in the coal mine.
Well, in its white roses are traditionally planted in vineyards. Roses and grapevines come from the same family, if you are into that kind of stuff, and so they also suffer from a very similar disease called powdery mildew, and so the history has it that farmers who were looking on protecting their grapevines would plant roses at the end of their vineyard, with the idea that when the roses start to get powdery mildew, they were more sensitive than the grapes. You would know it was time to spray or protect your grapes from powdery mildew. And so they were an indicator. They were the canary in the coal mine. We have a lot of roses at the property, but we have better ways to indicate whether we've got mildew on the way now. So we don't have them for that specific purpose. But roses are a great thing to have around the farm. That's for sure. And so you have to protect them the same way you have to protect grapes. So. But it's an interesting tradition, and you see it in a lot of vineyards. You could ask a lot of people who've got roses at the end of the vineyard why they planted them, and they said, "Oh, I don't know, everyone else did." But the real reason is that originally they were planted for the protection of powdery mildew in grapes. Yeah, interesting story. Who are these people? These are great questions. You got smart people in New Hampshire, don't you?
We do. Let's see. So we also have another question. This is probably a good question for Colin to help with too, on how we decide, or how you decide what Frog Leap wines come to New Hampshire and how you decide which ones we don't get.
So that's actually a question for John, because we'll take anything he's willing to sell us. We were just talking about this 60 case or 70 case Valdegi that he makes. I'm like, John, why are you even bothering telling me this? I want it. Honestly, we would want it because my VP of sales eats up Valdegi. So we're huge fans of Frog's Leap, but there's a lot that they make that is just in such small quantities that it's more limited towards their tasting room and their wine club. So we have all of the core staples, the Sauv Blanc, the Chardonnay, the Merlot, the Zinfandel, and the Cabernet. This wine that we'll get to in a minute. And then whenever there's fun one-offs, we jump on them. So basically whatever John wants to sell us, we buy it.
Well, New Hampshire gets special treatment because it's one of my favorite places to come. So anything you want, we got for you. Although that Valdegi is going to be a little hard to find. We'll do our best. Yeah. But
this is recorded, John.
Yeah.
I'll hold you to that.
I keep forgetting that. Wineries love to have fun with the experimental varieties, and quite honestly, a number of these varieties. We make a wine called Heritage, and has 7 different varieties into it. Everything from Charbonneau to Mondeuse to Mourvedre to Riesling, believe it or not, in a red wine, Petit Sera. What are the 7, and Carignan, and this is a wine that's a sum of its parts, and a lot of the great wines in the world are exactly that. The interesting thing about that wine, I mentioned the 7 varietals. 6 of those varietals were more widely planted than Cabernet Sauvignon when I came to the Napa Valley in 1975, and so what we've lost is a little bit in Napa is everyone rushed to plant Cabernet Sauvignon. We lost some of these magical varieties, what we call the heritage varieties, and it's a shame because some of them make really interesting wines. But you plant them and they tend to want the same kind of soils as great Cabernet Sauvignon, and all your neighbors think you're crushed, you're stupid because you're selling your heritage wine for $20 or $30 a bottle, and you're selling your Cabernet for $70 a bottle, and they're all going, "What the hell are you doing?" But you have to keep winemaking fun and interesting. So that's part of the reason we do it. But another reason that we do it is that we suspect that we know the climate is changing in Napa, and there was no greater evidence of that than the wildfires of both in 2017 and last year. And so there's a lot of prediction that Cabernet Sauvignon, which is a very sensitive variety, in certain locations in Napa is not going to adapt well to climate change. So what are we going to plant? And so why not Valdegi? Why not Carignan? These make some of the greatest wines in the world. So we think that having a little bit of knowledge about varietal diversity is one of our hedges when it comes to climate change. Climate change, we need some red wine if we're going to talk about climate change. So I'm going to pour myself a glass of Zinfandel. I hope some of you guys have some there. God, I love this wine. And look, you guys are going to you're going to have, summer is coming even to New Hampshire. I want to tell you that, don't despair. It's, I wasn't supposed to tell you, but it's 82 degrees here in Napa right now, and absolutely a gorgeous late spring day here. But it's coming to you, and so you're going to want some of these your wines when you're outside and barbecuing, and summer is coming. And a lot of people think, well, summer is when we drink white wine, and winter is when we drink red wine. And honestly, for me, it's exactly the opposite. To me, I love to drink these fruity, crushable red wines, I call them, in the summer. And the reason is you're outside, and you know how it can get there. Even in New Hampshire, you can get one of these muggy 85, 90 degrees days with high humidity. And I just saw it's 48 degrees and pouring rain here. Someone, Joseph, is not happy with me. Joseph, it's coming. The good weather's coming. But if you're barbecuing or anything like that, these reds that you can actually chill down, what I would call chillable reds, are amazing for the summertime, because even if they warm up a little bit in the glass as you're drinking, I mean, you have a glass of Sauvignon Blanc and it's 85 degrees out and it's high humidity. In a few minutes, it's too warm. So you end up chucking an ice cube into it or something, We need cozies, I guess, for white wine. But red wines, if they warm up a little bit, it's all great. By the time the barbecue's ready, the wine's ready. So I'm a total fan of this. And Zinfandel is wonderful. And Tracy's asking what to serve with Zinfandel, and I say what not to serve with Zinfandel. This wine is so fruity. It's so delicious. Ours is relatively low in alcohol, so you can just crush it. You can just drink it like crazy. So. This is a sophisticated wine. It's a Napa Zinfandel, so don't be afraid of trying it with something sophisticated. But it's also just so friendly and so drinkable. So anything off the grill, this is my pizza. When I think of the equivalent in a European style wine, I go to Rosa di Montalcino or a Chianti. Is the same. I would drink those kind of wines as an analogy or analogous to this wine in terms of its drinkability. There's a trick to this wine, should I tell you? This wine we believe at Frog Sleep, to get a wine to taste more like Zinfandel, there needs to be less Zinfandel in it. And so this is not 100% Zinfandel, not even close. Actually, it's barely legal Zinfandel, to be honest with you. And that means it has to be 75% Zinfandel, and I think this is like 76% Zinfandel. And the other is mostly Petit Sirah, a little bit of Carignan. And the reason is that these are called co-fermentations. We actually ferment these grapes together, the Carignan, the Petit Sirah, and the Zinfandel. And the reason is for Zinfandel to get this much fruit. See how fruity this wine is and how bold it is and how just wonderful. And yet it's not heavy. It's not alcoholic. It doesn't hit you over the head and knock you and drag you into the cave by your hair. It's not that style of wine, right? It's very drinkable wine. That's the contribution of the other varieties, which we can pick at lower sugar content, ferment with a really nice ripe Zinfandel, and you get the best of both worlds. A very drinkable, very fun sort of wine that's got all the seriousness of a well-ripened Zinfandel. So that's and some of the greatest wines in the world are made this way. If you're a European wine aficionado, the Chateauneuf de Pape or Riojas or so many of the great wines from the south of France. I mean, Chateau Simon's got 14 different varieties in it, right? And so it is these wines that are greater than the sum of their parts, and that's how we feel totally about the Zinfandel, basically. And so that's our little secret with this wine. And we have a few more with it, but that's the only one I can tell you, or else I'd have to kill you. So anyway, Zinfandel, don't be afraid of this. This stock up before they run out of this wine for summer, because this is and if you end up with a few extra bottles, you can drink it for Thanksgiving. That's the whole point of it. So buy this by the case, not by the bottle. That's got to be the way to go. Yeah. How are we doing with questions, Shannon? I haven't been paying attention.
Good. We have another interesting one. Do you have any microclimates on the vineyard?
Well, Napa's nothing but microclimates, and that's we're microclimates in terms of soil, in terms of nuance. Remember, we talked about this at the very beginning, that this huge temperature difference, but that only partly explains it. We showed you this, right? This is the fog rolling in. Here's the incredible. This is on a summer day where it's probably 95 to 100 degrees when this picture was taken. And that warm air is rising and it's pulling the fog off the Pacific Ocean. And that, by an hour later from this photo, it'll be 20 degrees cooler. And you will be looking for your down comforter to sleep that night. You'll have a sweater on by the time dinner's over, after having been 100 degrees during the day. This is this big, huge diurnal effect. And of course, where the fog comes in and where it settles and so on is the microclimates of the Napa Valley. And it's extremely maddening because no site in Napa is exactly the same as the other. It makes for interesting wines, but you'd love to have a little more consistency, because now you're trying to find out where all these microclimates are and make sure you've got the right variety planted and the right rootstock and farming it the right way, the right trellising methods, so on and so forth. So it is part of what it means to farm in the Napa Valley is this tremendous, when you add the complexity of soil, these microclimates, the influence of the fog off the bay, the huge diurnal effect night to day, you're talking about a lot of things to contend with in making wine. That's why I think the idea that we would only produce one variety in Napa is kind of stupid, if you will. And it's a little bit of a shame that when Cabernet became 87% of the red grapes in Napa now are Cabernet Sauvignon, because people think that's what you should grow in Napa. I would say that maybe 30% of Napa should be planted to Cabernet Sauvignon at best, and only 20% of it's probably great. So that's unfortunately when it becomes the variety to talk about and the profitable variety to plant, it often gets planted where it might not be the best soil or microclimate for that variety. And for example, where we grow our Sauvignon Blanc, I think I may have even mentioned this, where we grow our Sauvignon Blanc is perfect for Sauvignon Blanc. Soil's too deep for Cabernet Sauvignon. It's a lousy place to grow Cabernet Sauvignon. All 4 vineyards around it are planted to Cabernet Sauvignon. And I go to my friends, I go, what the hell are you planting Cabernet Sauvignon for? It's a terrible soil for Cabernet Sauvignon. And they say, what the hell are you planting Sauvignon Blanc for? You can make more money on bad Cabernet than you can great Sauvignon Blanc. And I go, oh, well, there you go. That's the way it goes. So, Zinfandel, you guys love this wine. Drink it up. It's not even expensive. You guys give it away. Or I give it away, I guess.
Yeah, $35.99 down to $33.99.
I'm buying some. Would you send me a case of it?
I can send you a case.
I appreciate that.
Age as well too. You'll have it for a while.
All right, good. Well, how are we coming here? We should try this one last wine, and I have to tell you, I haven't had this for a while myself, so I'm kind of looking forward to this. And I love the pop of a cork. Don't get me wrong, you guys, but I'll tell you, the pop of a screw cap is not a bad thing when you're in a hurry for a drink. This comes off pretty easy, doesn't it? So when we made this wine for y'all, we said, let's make this as easy to enjoy and drink as possible. This is a very unique wine made exclusively for the state of New Hampshire. And that's how much we love you guys, man. We'll make a wine just for you. And I'm fired up because this is a combination I don't know if anyone's ever done this before, where we've got old vine Carignan cross-blended with a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon. That's what I did to make this wine. When you guys said you wanted something special, I said, I'm going to make this weird. And I understand that it's gained a little popularity in New Hampshire. You guys are ripping through this wine. God, I wish I'd kept some of this for myself. I have like 2 bottles left. I want you to taste the acidity in that wine, though, and that's the Carignan. These vines were planted in 1942. Can you believe it? And we don't talk about that so much, but part of the reason that we love to farm sustainably is that the vines live longer. We talked about the Chardonnay was planted in 1979. The Valdegay that you were talking about, Colin, was planted in 1947. Our Rachel Rossi Reserve Sauvignon Blanc planted in 1981. White grapes, these vines planted in 1942. In Europe, to make what's called a Grand Cru wine in Burgundy, the vines have to be 25 years old before they can qualify for Grand Cru. And we feel that is really important to have that age on the vines. But the average lifespan of a vineyard in Napa has been reduced to 17 years. They turn over much more quickly, and so you never get that true nuance of the wine. So this wine is called the Granite Red Blend, and made exclusively for New Hampshire. How did we come up with that name? We call it the Granite Red, and this is made. You can only find this, I guess, just in the stores. That you guys don't have this available online, right?
Yep, it's actually only available in our state liquor stores. If you go to our Power Buy section, you'll find this wine presented there in every one of our stores that has a Power Buy section in their store. This is a super unique wine, and this kind of highlights what the Power Buy program is about. It's about bringing these very special wines to the consumer so they can have an opportunity to try something that, like John said, this is unique to just us, and it is a very, very special wine. You're not going to find anything like this anywhere.
And you're giving it away too, right, Chad? This is not an expensive wine.
Yeah, it's $19.99 for the Granite Red
Oh.
Blend.
Jesus Christ. Yeah. Well, God bless the people of New Hampshire. That's what I say. And this is, remember, we were talking about crushable reds for summertime. Man, nothing better than this. So you should jump on this, because with that acidity, when the warm weather comes, this is what you're going to have. And, you know, even if you're out on the beach, out on the coast, man, this with some clams or something, or barbecue some oysters, or grill a lobster, totally. With this acidity, awesome. Yeah. Well, once again, we're going to run out of time, but I wanted to finish up a couple thoughts about the climate change, because I watched last night a documentary with Greta Thunberg, right? The young climate activist. And I was so impressed by that. You know, climate change has been a passion of mine for some time, because being a farmer, I think you're much more attuned to this. And you know, I want to caution everyone out there to be careful in your thinking about climate change, because, and I'll relate the story. I was down in Florida just before the pandemic doing a wine dinner. I was getting ride back with the Uber driver, and he asked where I was from, and I said, well, I'm from California. He goes, oh my God. He says, California, that's where you have all that global climate change. And the idea that, you know, we had global climate change in California, but nowhere else. And I said, well, you're so lucky not to have any global climate change in Florida. And he says, I know, that's why everyone's moving here. And I think that, obviously, on the face of it, it's just absolutely ludicrous. I mean, there is something global about global climate change, and it's coming to you. And you guys may even be noticing it. And by the time we notice it, it could be too late. And so I want everyone to start thinking about this and doing what they can. In the wine business, that means three things. One is, what can we do to slow the rate of climate change? And we're going through a carbon audit right now and looking at everything that we do to see what we can do to slow the rate of climate change. And I think that's so important to do. I think we have to find ways to mitigate the effects of climate change. And so things that we're doing in the vineyard, we're talking about these varietals, Pierce to see, all these things are things, well, as it comes, how do we adapt our methods to that? But I think really the exciting thing for us is that, being farmers, is that we can actually do something to reverse climate change. Our vineyards, our soils are where we store carbon. And so if we use farming techniques that put more back into the soil than we take out. So remember, we talked about organic farming, this idea that if we take from the soil, we must return to the soil in equal measure. In truth, we can add back to the soil more than what we took out, and in the process sequester carbon. And so this is a big part of what we're going to want to do. And I would ask everyone out there, there's a group of wineries called the Porto Protocols that have accepted the challenge of climate change. And quite honestly, the challenge to each winery in that group is one that I would put out to you, each and every one of you listening today. And that's simple how they word it. They say, if you're doing nothing, do something. If you're doing a little bit, do a little bit more. And if you're doing a lot, and some of us are, and I would congratulate you if you are as well, find new ways to challenge yourself. Well, Frogs Leap's the point of finding new ways to challenge itself, and we've accepted that challenge, and we're going to continue to do that. But we ask everyone out there who's doing nothing. There's so much low-hanging fruit out there where we can all make a small difference, and I really want everyone to kind of embrace that. You know, they asked Greta last night whether she had any hope, because the evidence that we're doomed is fairly strong, to be honest with you. And she says, you know, hope's an interesting thing. I think the only way you can have hope is to take action, you know. And so I think if you're believing this is hopeless, the only way to have hope is to take some action. So I would ask each and every one of you to find some way you can contribute in the fight against climate change, because it's going to affect your lives. It's going to affect your children's lives. It's going to affect your grandchildren's lives. Even if we don't worry about humans, which is fair enough. We caused all this problem in the first place. Even if you don't care about that, what about the millions of species that were extincting who had no fault of their own in this process? So let's just do something. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox, but I want to get that out there because I think we need to take every chance we have to make our small contributions, because everyone out there did something, and enough of us do a little bit more, and a few of us do a lot. We've got to hope. We got hope because we're taking action. So I know that has not too much to do with drinking great wine, but for us, it has everything to do with making, growing, and drinking great wine. So with that, there you go. We'll take some questions. Sorry to get on my soapbox, Shannon, but you asked for it, you know.
Hey, we
It's
already
what
have some positive comments in the chat window, acknowledging that, you know, a small bit goes a long way.
Yeah.
We actually have a question from Dawn, who is curious that in this moment in time, you know, with everything that's happening with COVID, how Frog's Leap has adapted, kind of come to survive and thrive.
Yeah, and it's exactly things like our relationship with you guys, with with NHLC, with you guys at the liquor. I mean, we've had a great partnership for years. You guys stepped up and helped us and bought more wine when it was necessary. And people didn't stop drinking, but they were drinking at home. They had to find new ways to buy it, and that's where you guys came in. And I suspect, Chad, you can answer this. I suspect your sales haven't really dipped too much during the pandemic because people kept on drinking, right? And so we just had to find people where they were. We found them online. We found them through our Fellowship of the Frog, our wine club. We found them through relationships like yours with people like yourselves. We weren't too proud to sell into a store or a grocery store because that's where people are at the moment. That's where they're buying their wines. And so we want to meet people where we are. We have a tremendous number of loyal people to Frog's Leap who reached out and said, what can we do to help you during these times? And we said, drink a little more wine, and say, okay, we'll do it. So, people stepped up. They bought our wine. They supported you guys, and we're going to make it through. No time. We put a tremendous amount of work into. I have 65 employees, and we really had, and many of them essential. I couldn't stop pruning grapes. I couldn't stop harvesting grapes, and so we had so much money go into testing and doing these kind of things. And now all of our workers here at the winery are vaccinated. We were able to get in on that early, and so we did what we had to do, just like you all have had to do what you've had to do, basically to keep it going. So thank you for the question. I mean, the wildfires, the drought, the pandemic. I mean, it seems like it's something new all the time. I'm looking for the locusts. Apparently they're coming. So. Be careful what you wish for, but that's those stories are as old as farming themselves, and you just get yourself up in the morning and say, "What murder hornets?" Yeah, thank you, Tracy. You just pick yourself up and go out and do it again. That's all we can do, basically. It's a story of farming, and but it does seem like we're beset with more problems than ever, and I think we can trace some of those things to the mistakes we've made in the past, and climate change is only one example of that. So not to be Debbie Downer, but we need to step it up, you guys. We really do. Yeah. So how'd we do?
We're doing great. I'm going to end it on one final good question in regards to Frog's Leap in the coming years, and what your plans are for future sustainability, keeping in mind the climate change, and what are your plans?
Well, it's a great question, and we're a family winery, as we've mentioned. We grow our grapes. We're a family of winemakers, so we grow our grapes. We make our wine ourselves. I've been the winemaker. My son is now stepping up into the winemaking role. He's been in charge of the vineyards now for a few years. So we're going to stay a family winery, and that's no small feat, as you know. Many family wineries here have been sold to larger companies. I mean, my best friend growing up in the business was Dan Duckhorn. Duckhorn's now a private or a publicly traded company, making more than 1 million cases of wine a year. They're making a seltzer, so that's kind of what happens and so our view for the future is to keep it family, to keep it true to what we believe in, and I can assure you the next generation and is all my kids are very much committed to the same thing. And I'm going to double the number of grandchildren I have here in a couple of months, from 2 to 4. So we're working on that generation. I think we're trying to find new ways to challenge ourselves and make even better wines. And we'll be here. We'll be here, and that's all we can hope to do. There is no end of ways to find to find ways to package it. When we're working on a lower weight bottle right now, we're working on a microgrid. We're working on a lot of sustainability issues that are kind of out there in the future on different varietals. We're experimenting with varieties that have been crossbred against Pierce's disease. There's a ton of things that we can be doing both to answer the claim. We've put in a misting system. Many of you have been down in Florida or Arizona in the summer when it's so hot down there, and they mist air up in the ground up in the air to cool the air, evaporates before. We're actually putting some of that out into our vineyards to see if that works. So we're not done experimenting and making all kinds of things work for us. And if it God forbid it comes too warm to grow grapes in the Napa Valley, I think we're all got a bigger problem if that happens. But if we can only grow rutabagas, they will be the best rutabagas in the world. And so we'll keep on farming no matter what it is. But we're hoping for a better answer than that for sure. So we're just going to keep working on it ourselves, and we invite you guys to join us. And I'll finish with this, is because a lot of people say, well, how can we make a difference, particularly when it comes to the wine business? And the answer is you're the only people that can make a difference in the wine business. And the way you do that is vote with your dollars, quite frankly, because I know everyone who's making wine in the Napa Valley, if they couldn't sell it unless it were bottled or packaged or grown sustainably, and they would switch over tomorrow. But it doesn't matter. If no one cares about that, then they're not going to make that change. And so you, the consumer, has the ultimate power with respect to that. It's called the power of your dollar. So learn about the people who are producing your wines. Know about it. I think you guys in New Hampshire are doing a good job of putting that information out. Do more of it, and promote the producers and support the producers who care about this, if you care about it. And that's the only way we can change. That's how we did it with organic. We were the first certified organic vineyard in Napa. Now there are more organic vineyards in Napa than any other county in California. Why? Because we made it the cool thing to do, and consumers started to say, I don't want pesticides, I don't want this on my fruit, and they changed. And that's what switches this, and it's going to be the same with climate change. Vote with your dollars, support the producers out there who care about these things, and if you care about them. And I think that's so important.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John. This has been so awesome. Everyone's been leaving great comments saying thank you. We have comments on Facebook that are saying that they have a new appreciation for wine just based off your presentation. So you're hitting home for a lot of people, which is awesome. And we're so happy to have you, and we can't wait to have you back actually in the state. Hopefully soon.
I'm glad to do that, and I'm glad to join you guys anytime. We never run out of things to talk about when we're together, Shannon. And Chad, thank you very much. Colin, good to see you, my friend. And yes, I hope to get there. And so let's plan a party when I'm there, and have a little fun in New Hampshire. You guys are dear people to me, and appreciate very much giving me this opportunity to talk about my passion for making wine, growing grapes and making wine. So thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for all the support. You guys have been tremendous and have really helped us a lot. So thank you all. And let's all get together in person soon enough. And by the way, we're opening up at the winery. So if people are going to come to California, please come and visit us at Frog's Leap. And it's being here really cements the message. So we'd love to have you here at the winery for sure.
Awesome. Well, for those of you that are still on, which is pretty much everyone, we're going to be having more events like this coming up. So feel free to check our Eventbrite page for any and all updates. And yeah, hope to have John again very, very soon, in person or virtually, however it happens. I'm down for it.
Love you guys, and let's
All
talk
right,
soon.
great.
Thanks a lot, you guys. All right.
All right.
All right,
Have a
John,
great
thank
night,
you.
everyone. Bye.